Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about digital identity, which is actually the first kind of thing we've spun out as a formalized sub-lab within the CoLab. So the first question I always get is, how do we define digital identity? What is digital identity? And it's really just, it's a set of attributes relating to an entity. And so that could be a person, that could be an organization, it could be an object, even a piece of software. So we'll just think some entity and we attach attributes to it. That constitutes a digital identity. So in the physical world, we've actually had thousands and thousands of years where we've been able to kind of get used to the concept of identity and find ways of handling identity. It's very useful to be able to identify this is a friend versus this is a saber-toothed tiger, maybe I should run. Or this is a friendly human, this is somebody that maybe I'm at war with, or that we have a trade dispute. When we kind of get more to the modern world, we've come up with technology to kind of help us with identity. So we've come up with the idea of names, being able to kind of label different entities, being able to have physical tokens that actually help us kind of identify someone that we may not know ourselves directly. But when we get to the digital world, this gets a lot harder. Everyone's seen this famous cartoon, right? On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. It's great. It's also a problem if nobody knows that you're a dog. And the problem here is that data is data is data, right? If you're communicating with someone online, there's no way to know if these bits came from a person, came from a dog, came from just a piece of software. You really just don't know who's on the other side of that interaction. And if you think about any kind of commercial transaction between an entity, maybe a bank, or some other kind of retail institution, if you're having any kind of transaction, there's questions on both sides. The institution wants to know about the person that they're engaging with, and the person wants to know what am I sharing and kind of what do they need to actually know about my identity in order to complete this transaction. So our response to this has been to collect lots of identity data and lock it up in these very secure silos. Except there's a problem, and that's that we really suck at keeping data secure. So putting data in these silos has not worked out well. I don't know if you saw the news yesterday or over the weekend, some big Republican database of potential voters, not just Republican voters, but there was close to 200 million people who just had lots of their identity data made available, just not password protected. It was in a database that was publicly accessible to anybody. So we really, really suck at this. So we've started up this digital identity lab, Mosaic, to start to answer some of these questions about how we should better handle identity in a digital context. So we're really looking at identity pretty broadly, so individuals, machines, organizations, and we really want to enable trust, security, and make sure there's actual usable identity for a digitally native world. So these are our research areas, and kind of step back, and there's kind of a bunch of different areas. We've actually been evolving these and through conversations with our members, figuring out which ones we want to prioritize. But at a high level, we're talking about distributed identity models, which is often where blockchains come in. We're really wanting to improve authentication and security, make sure that data and reputation is portable. I think that's one of the keys to a distributed identity system, is to make sure that you're not locked into any one identity provider. We're rethinking our models of privacy and trust in terms of how our identity and how our data is managed. And then we're also kind of focusing explicitly on extending this to machines. We like to frame things often in human-centered terms, but I think it's really helpful just to have a place where we say identity generally, how do we apply it to things other than people? So first, distributed identity models. These are the three kind of startup/protocols that I'm most excited about in the distributed identity space. Blockstack is actually one of the startups who's participating in Mosaic. And the idea here is that rather than having Google or Facebook or even your bank kind of act as an identity provider for you online, you can actually be your own identity provider. You can kind of essentially hold the keys to your own data and decide who to share it with. You can still have other entities attesting to things about your data, right? If I just say, hey, this is my driver's license information, why are you going to believe me? you may want some other entity that's going to essentially digitally sign that information and attach it to this identity, but I still control the identity. I still choose when I want to present this data and who I want to share it with. Oops. The next group is around authentication and security. So this is really how do we actually know that we're keeping our data secure, and that when someone says that I am this person, this digital identity represents me, how can you know to trust them, that that actually is them? So we've got a couple of startups here that we're working with. One is Averon. So how many of you have used some form of two-factor authentication? Where you get, okay, wow, I've never seen that many hands go up. That makes me so happy. So oftentimes this is done via SMS, right? You get like, you try to log into the app, they say, okay, we're gonna send you a text message, enter this 8-digit code, and it's a real pain in the butt. Well, Averon actually makes that go away. They actually have connected with all of the major telecoms in the US and a lot of ones around the world. And what they can do is your carrier is already tracking the data packets so they can bill you for them. And so what they're doing is confirming on the back end that yes, these data packets did originate on the device associated with the phone number that's in the account. So basically they're able to, via their API, any application can integrate this and have 100% compliance on two-factor authentication without the user having to take any action. It's automatically confirming on the back end that this login, that this new account creation is coming from the phone number that they think it should be coming from. So we really like when we see those kind of trade-offs get broken. You don't have to be more secure or less friction. In this case, they actually deliver both. The other one is Civic, and they are they're doing a number of things, but one of their first products, which they've kind of moved away from being their main focus, is around securing our social security numbers. So they let you register your social security number, and then they partner with banks, with telecoms, with anybody who might want to run a credit check on you, and then they let you essentially add a second factor of authentication on it so that you'll get a push notification to your phone before there's a hard pull in your credit report. So it actually kind of proactively allows you to authenticate yourself so that people can't fraudulently use information that's out there. Portable data and reputation. So this is the other area. We actually had a team. Anybody from this team here? The Authenticity team? No? Okay. So we had a team in the January sprints that was really thinking about how can we take data that we have in all these different silos and be able to use it in other contexts. And they were doing facial recognition, kind of pulling from your different social media profiles and being able to say, yes, this person who just took a selfie is the same person that we see across these profiles. The other that we are working with actually is a startup called Tyrion. And what they're doing is they help enable the portability of data by actually kind of time-stamping it and providing provenance. And I know that I think your team is kind of looking at this in some cases for like housing, but the idea that whenever you have data, that you can actually timestamp that, kind of record it in a public blockchain so that nobody can lie and say that the data was different later. It actually just kind of essentially locks the data in amber and preserves it so that it can't be changed at a future date. And so we think that's really important for being able to move from one provider to another. So privacy and trust models. This really gets at data, right? When we think about your identity, it's not just username and password, right? It's not just identifiers. We think about all this different data about all of our online activity, our purchasing activity, our social media activity. If we want to have that used by other companies, right now they're just scraping it, they're just gathering it from every source they can, combining it, building these huge profiles on you, which then somebody inevitably steals. So what these two startups, Dataku and Enigma, are both focused on ways that you can actually have better control of your data. So what Dataku does is let you actually aggregate that data and then say to advertisers, hey, if you want access to this data, and I pulled in from purchase histories, we've got social media history, all these different things, I will give you access to it as part of an anonymized pool of data in return for some payment. So actually putting it back so that you're just not giving away all of your data, you're actually in control of saying, I'm going to intentionally contribute it and receive compensation for doing so. Enigma is actually a startup doing something around secure multi-party computation. And so that sounds like really big and scary. What they're doing is making it possible for there to be an encrypted set of data that one party holds that somebody else is then given permission to run some analysis on. So what this basically lets you do is be able to say, hey, I'm willing to give you access to my purchase history for you to make some recommendations to me. I don't want you to know everything I purchased, but I want you to be able to run a certain search here to see, what brand I might prefer. You can do that without them ever actually holding onto your data. So you don't have to worry that you're handing over all of your purchase history to some company and you don't know how they're going to use it in the future. They can just use it one time without ever actually seeing it in an unencrypted form. So this is, I think, probably that's interesting on a consumer level. We're also very interested in this on a kind of enterprise to enterprise level. So we've actually seen, I don't know if you saw Google announce that now they're able to connect kind of your online ad viewing activities with real life purchase behaviors. And it's a little scary. They're actually using a form of this technology where they're not seeing your purchasing behavior. The kind of credit card companies are not actually seeing your online activities. They're essentially blinding it to both parties and only seeing if there's a match and being able to say, yes, we know that, someone who saw this ad also made this purchase. So it's actually doing it in a very, very privacy preserving way for something that sounds like it's really infringing upon privacy. And then for Know Your Machine, I think we've probably talked about this before, but one of the first examples we did of this was a project that Reed led around having this solar panel that could issue renewable energy certificates based on having a unique identity for that panel and being able to track the history of the energy production on that panel. So we're also starting to really think about this in terms of vehicles or drones. What does an identity look like for something that's not just a cell phone, but really something that can move about the world and really take action? What kind of identification does it need to have? What do we need to know about it when transacting with it? Do we need to trace that back to the owner of that device? What information needs to be shared for these transactions? So that's also an area that we're delving into. So that's kind of the areas. Overall, we're really excited about this because we think it can lead to better security, better privacy for users. It's also more convenient, right? Right now, think about how much friction you have logging into different websites, different services, and kind of showing who you are. We're talking about the home buying process, right? And how manual so much of that is and painful it is to share. So we can really, if we can safely digitize stuff, we can make it a lot more convenient to share the pieces we want when we want. And we can also create increasingly personalized experiences. We think that this is one of the big areas. When we talk about AI, we're talking about a lot of different things, but I think the thing that kind of captures imagination is often this kind of personalized AI. It's really hard to get personalized with AI if you don't have a lot of data, both to train your algorithm and then also for yourself, right? No human, let alone no algorithm, can actually give me a personalized experience if they don't know something about me. And so the more data we're able to securely have in digital form and be able to share in a secure way, the more personalized experiences we'll be able to create. For businesses, lowering fraud, theft, streamlining processes, and then again, especially around this personalization, there's new revenue opportunities. One of the projects we're actually working on within Mosaic right now is with one of the utility companies that is part of the CoLab, and one of the startups, Civic, that we talked about earlier, saying hey, the utility company actually knows a lot about where you live, right? They know your physical address. They know that this is probably one of the last bills that you're not going to pay. Nobody wants to have their electricity turned off. So we've got a history of payments at this physical address. This company hadn't been thinking about their kind of identity data they have in their customers as an asset. So we're actually building a prototype where the customer is able to have in digital form a signed copy of their kind of payment history and be able to share that with financial institutions, especially for customers who maybe don't have formal means of identification, may not be able to qualify for credit or even qualify to open up a checking or savings account. This actually provides a pretty strong identity assertion that we can then use to offer financial services to them. And it's also a new revenue opportunity because you can pay back to the utility for having provided this information, even though it's under control of the user choosing when to share or not. We're also looking at the user getting to share in part of that payment as well. So that's kind of an example of some of the new stuff we're looking at. So kind of, this is kind of how we've thought about the steps in this process. We really want to create this kind of secure, usable, interoperable identity layer, we think that this can enable an explosion in commerce by allowing a much wider range of trusted interactions. This is going to enable decentralized markets everywhere, which kind of ties into one of our theories around blockchains and what that enables. It's going to enable a lot of open and streaming data because we'll be able to trust the data sources and know the provenance of all that data, which ties into kind of our IoT angle as well. And then that's going to enable bots and machine agents. We're going to be able to have a lot of both physical devices and software agents acting on our behalves a lot more effectively once we have these secure identity systems in place.